My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. Sometimes, life's greatest lessons come not through our strength, but through our struggles. This is the story of Julia, a woman who discovered the beauty of grace in the face of adversity. Julia was unstoppable, or so she thought. As a rising star in her law firm, she thrived on long hours, intense deadlines, and the thrill of winning high-stakes cases. Her colleagues admired her sharp mind and relentless drive, while her friends teased her about being a perfectionist. "Julia, do you ever slow down?" they'd ask. "Not while there's work to do," she'd reply with a confident smile. But life, as Julia would soon learn, has a way of slowing us down whether we like it or not. It started with small things: a dull ache in her hands, fatigue that no amount of coffee could shake, and a sense of heaviness that lingered even on her best days. At first, Julia brushed it off as stress, but the symptoms grew worse. One day, after struggling to open a simple jar of peanut butter, Julia knew something was wrong. A visit to the doctor confirmed her fears. She had rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic autoimmune condition that would cause pain, inflammation, and fatigue for the rest of her life. Her first reaction was disbelief. "I'm too young for this. I have too much to do." But denial quickly turned to anger. How could this happen to someone like her? Someone who thrived on control and efficiency. Julia tried to push through as if nothing had changed. She kept her diagnosis a secret from her co-workers, determined to maintain her reputation as the firm's most dependable attorney. But the pain was relentless. One afternoon, during a meeting with an important client, her hands began to tremble as she tried to take notes. She dropped her pen, and the client's concerned look was like a mirror reflecting her own vulnerability. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Julia broke down. She cried for the life she felt she was losing, for the independence and strength she had always taken for granted. In her desperation, she whispered a prayer she hadn't said in years. "God, I don't know what to do. Please help me." The next morning, Julia's best friend, Carla, stopped by unannounced. Carla, a nurse, had noticed Julia's struggles but had waited for the right moment to reach out. "I know something's wrong," Carla said gently. "You don't have to face this alone." Julia hesitated but finally confessed everything. As she spoke, the weight she'd been carrying began to lift. Carla listened patiently, then said, "Julia, you don't have to be strong all the time. Sometimes it's okay to lean on others and on God." Those words lingered in Julia's mind. She had always equated strength with independence, but maybe there was another kind of strength, one that came from admitting her limits and allowing others to step in. In the weeks that followed, Julia began to make changes. She opened up to her team at work, explaining her condition and asking for support. To her surprise, they responded with compassion, offering to share responsibilities and accommodate her needs. She also joined a support group for people with chronic illnesses, where she met others who understood her struggles. Their stories of resilience and hope inspired her, and she found herself reflecting on a verse she'd heard long ago in church. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Could it be true? Could grace really fill the gaps her own strength couldn't? One day, during a particularly difficult flare-up, Julia had to cancel an important court appearance. She felt defeated, but Carla reminded her, "Julia, strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. And sometimes, getting back up means letting others help you." Those words became a turning point. Julia began to see her condition not as a limitation, but as an invitation to live differently. She started pacing herself, prioritizing rest, and accepting help when she needed it. To her surprise, letting go of her need to control everything didn't make her weaker. It made her relationships deeper and her life richer. As Julia adapted to her new reality, she found unexpected blessings. Her colleagues, inspired by her vulnerability, opened up about their own challenges. Her support group became like a second family, offering encouragement and laughter on even the hardest days. Most importantly, Julia's relationship with God deepened. She began to pray not just in desperation but in gratitude, thanking Him for the grace that carried her through each day. One evening, As she journaled, Julia wrote, "I used to think strength meant doing it all on my own, but now I see that true strength comes from leaning on grace, from knowing I don't have to do it all." Months later, Julia gave a presentation at a conference on balancing professional success with personal challenges. She shared her journey openly, describing how her diagnosis had forced her to reevaluate what really mattered. To anyone struggling, she said, "Remember this. Your value isn't tied to your productivity or your ability to be perfect. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from embracing your weaknesses and trusting that grace will carry you through." The room erupted in applause, but what mattered most to Julia was the peace she felt in her heart, a peace that came from knowing she didn't have to rely on her own strength alone. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. Julia's story reminds us that our struggles don't disqualify us. They can transform us. Weakness isn't something to fear, but an opportunity for grace to shine through. When life feels overwhelming, remember that you don't have to carry it all on your own. Grace is sufficient. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about trusting that you'll be lifted back up. How can you lean into grace today?